Welcome to Lagnia-Pod. This is a special episode with Kyle Hamrick and I are going to interview mayoral candidate Spiro Cheriogotis. Spiro, how are you today?
Very good. Glad to be here. Thank you
We're
for
glad to have you here. Appreciate you
opportunity.
making the time to do this. And this is going to be a chance for us to ask you a few questions and let you answer in as complete form as you would like to, so that people can get a little bit more of an idea of what is going on. I know some of these things that you go to the forums and you go to debates, it can get a little canned, it gets a little tough. You get 30 seconds to answer. These are not 30-second answers. You can take your time and expand on things a little bit. We're going to start out with an easy one here. The mayor's job's incredibly busy. What made you desire to do this job, and what makes you the best candidate for the job? That's an easy question, right?
Yeah.
What makes you the best one?
Certainly one I thought about. It is busy. There's a lot to do, a lot that falls in the mayor's purview, and honestly, that's part of why I wanted to do it. I like a good challenge, but as a judge, you're limited in to just the people that appear before you in your courtroom. Those are the people you can really influence as a judge.
Yeah.
And what I love about being, hopefully being mayor, is that the entire city is your purview. Everyone who not just lives in but visits the city is within your purview, and it's my goal to improve lives. It's my goal as a judge to redirect lives into a positive direction, not just for that person's benefit, but for everyone who knows and loves them, everyone around them. And mayor just provides such an opportunity. As a judge, you see a lot of holes in society and holes in people's lives that as a judge, you really don't have an answer for. As mayor, you can build those programs. You can bridge those gaps and opportunity. Not a limitless budget, but you got a pretty big budget to play with to build out those services that you want to see. So that opportunity excites me. I just want to make people's lives better. Why am I the best candidate? I can tell you my heart's in the right place. I can tell you I'm doing it not for myself, but for others. I can tell you I've got quite a bit of experience in life. We talked a little bit about some of my earlier life experience, but I grew up in a family business. I have a small business now, and you have to run the city like a business. You can't run it on a deficit. We're not the federal government. We need to pay for the things we are spending money on. And also, as a prosecutor and judge, it's given me a really up-close view of what our city lacks, what people lack in their lives so that they can be a success. And so I hope to have the chance to fill some of those gaps.
So you are the youngest candidate in the race, which is a positive for some folks, maybe not for others. I know some of your opponents have suggested you don't have as much experience. How do you answer that?
Well, I have an experience working a full-time, state job while also running a business and having 4 children and a wife who's probably busier than me. So I've learned how to juggle quite a few things at one time and come up with good results.
That's one thing I was going to ask you. You've got 4 young kids and a busy wife. How are y'all going to balance this?
People ask us all the time, I don't know how you do it. How do you do it?
Yeah.
Truly, we understand that it takes a village to raise children. And thankfully, we've got some great grandparents, all mostly retired, not fully. We've got a good team of babysitters that we cycle in when we need to. But I do think as a parent, you've got to prioritize your children too.
Yeah.
And, there are just some things that I'm not going to miss. My daughter just wrapped up a play that she was in. I went to every one of them. Every time she was on stage, I was there. My sons are starting to play football. I'm going to go to their games. I might miss all the practices, but I'm going to be at the games, and I'm going to make sure that I'm pouring into my children just like I want to pour into this city, just like Lucy pours into Greer's. We want to make sure that we leave things better than we found them.
Mm-hmm. So I know we've talked a lot about crime. Crime has been sort of the dominant issue, and I'm going to go ahead and get it here and get it out of the way because I want to talk about some other things too. But maybe I'm trying to ask this a little different way. But crime's been the number one topic. Even as statistically, most crime in the city tracks are at 10-year lows or near 10-year lows. It seems much of the public's perception of Mobile having a crime problem is shaped by the issue of young men primarily shooting one another or at one another and hitting others over personal grievances. How do you envision making a difference in this problem over the first year or two of your term as mayor?
You hit the nail on the head. No matter how good we're doing on burglaries and car thefts and other crimes, so long as we have this random gun violence in our streets, it's going to leave people feeling unsafe, and we have to fight that. From I strive not to talk too much about police tactics, but to say it fairly simply, we need to intervene directly into the lives of these young men. And, being the guy I am, I'd like to provide opportunities and pathways out of this life for young men that are willing to take it, by getting that job training, that, skilled labor training, getting a welding certificate, frankly, getting out of their current environment. And if I can help that, I'm going to. But I also want them to know that, for the 361 gang affiliated young people we have in our city and surrounding cities, you're not going to operate in the dark. I know who you are, and I'm not going to allow you to continue down this path unchecked. And I think we need to devote more of the police department's resources directly with that group. If that's the group that is causing the chaos and mayhem in our city, that's where we need to focus. Mm-hmm. And I see ways that we can reorganize efforts, especially with like vice and narcotics task force and teams, to really focus in on, gun violence. From the other side, I think we have to cut off the supply. Right? We need to cut off the supply of desperate young men who are willing to do anything to further their life. And I understand how these young men get desperate. I understand, how difficult it must be to come home to an empty cupboard and an empty fridge. And I say this all the time. If I had a young brother and sister at home and empty fridge, and they were crying because they were hungry, and my neighbor offered me $20 to run a bag down the street, I know what I would have done as a young man, so I understand it. We need to paint clear pathways to opportunity. We need to provide services so they don't feel alone, that they can see those pathways, and whether that's in after school care, whether that's summer work programs, summer camps. I really want to pour some leadership and mentorship into the lives of many of these young people. And, the truth is we've had to make cuts over the last 10, 12 years. We had a pretty rough Our budget was in a rough state when Mayor Stimson took over. I think we're in a position now where we can afford to pay back into those programs and reinvigorate some of those after-school programs to really meet these children where they are, and hopefully cut off the supply. If you know that if you stick with school, if you're getting good advice and mentorship at after-school programs, and we really are gathering a community around you through the faith community or nonprofit community, it's a little easier to say, no, thanks. That's not for me.
Yeah.
So I think we attack it from both sides, both with policing and services.
It seems like that is a particularly intractable problem. And I know you said you didn't really want to talk about specifics with what police would be doing, but I'm going to ask you about specifics. Yeah. So, we had a shooting over here on Sunday morning, late, right after midnight.
Yeah.
What would police under you be doing differently that maybe would prevent something like that? Would there be anything that they could do differently to prevent something like that?
I don't. I like privacy. I'm a privacy guy, and I think privacy is kind of eroding in our current culture, but nobody expects to go downtown and be private, right? You're going downtown and out and about. So frankly, I think especially our entertainment districts downtown should be blanketed in cameras.
Yeah.
We should be able to see what is happening and what has happened in our areas. We need some lighting improvements. Crime often hides in the dark. I'm not sure how well lit that particular parking lot was, but I don't think very. I want to see more officers on foot, especially in downtown. Well, almost exclusively in downtown. I don't know that foot patrols really work anywhere else, but also close patrols. We know that people are out late in downtown. I think this event occurred in 2:30 in the morning, something like that. We can have some close patrols, really checking out what's happening outside of our bars and making sure people aren't being dangerous on their way home and up to no good in our parking lots. I mean, there have been, I know, in that very area, there have been holdups, robberies in that same area. So we just need to make sure that our downtown has a proper police presence.
Okay. We're going to move out of crime
Good. I was surprised you led with it.
I just want to get it out of the way, because I mean, I know I complain about it. I'm just like, hey, we've been talking about it. Let's talk about other things. So
it's important, but there are other important things.
We're going to get aspirational here. We talk a lot about the fixing of today's problems, but tell us your hopes for Mobile in 10 or 20 years, especially because of things that you would have implemented as mayor.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a lot of hopes. I hope to see a day where you can't think of Mobile, Alabama without thinking of our awesome public transportation system and how fun it is to ride our trolleys around town, how convenient they are, how they really enhance the vibe and the feel of Mobile. I don't want people to be able to leave Mobile without thinking of our waterfront in the future. Our waterfront has been dominated by industry, and we need that industry. We need the port. It's our biggest economic driver. But as we move forward, especially as this bridge continues to become a reality, they're sinking test pylons.
Right.
Okay, there's real work being done. I think there's a lot of redevelopment.
Actually happen one day. Yeah.
Lord willing. Lord willing. It'll be a top priority of mine to make sure that I'm partnering with our federal representatives to make sure that we're getting the TIFIA loan, which we need to make sure that we're closing out that last gap in funding, but we need to get to work on the bridge. It's not going to be built overnight, so we need to get to work on it quick. And I look at our riverfront, I see real opportunity to connect, for now, the convention center on down under the bridge. We can't build anything under that bridge, but maybe a nice park, maybe some turf, maybe some food trucks. But then if you continue south, after that, you run into the jail complex.
Yeah.
And a lot of really, there's some warehouse space, but to my knowledge, they don't use the water frontage. They could be located elsewhere. A lot of the business around there is bail bonding companies. And the truth is that we need a new jail.
Yeah, you've talked about this before, and this is an interesting idea. Expand on that.
Yeah, look, the federal government, Department of Justice is not going to let us have a jail that is at a minimum 150% occupancy forever. They've already, we've already gotten some heat, but it's going to happen. That's a project that's going to cost a lot of money, but if the federal government gets involved, it's going to cost 1.5 to 2 times the same amount of money for the same product. We need to be proactive. We don't need to wait until we're forced to move that jail. We need to move it. I don't think we need to expand upon it. I don't know that we've got the room to in the footprint of the jail that we have now, but that property is valuable. It might not always have been valuable, but if all of a sudden developers can reimagine that entire area, that's some really valuable waterfront property. And for me, one of the things I like the least about the jail is it's one of the last things you see. If you're on the interstate driving towards downtown Mobile, approaching the tunnel, soon you're going to see that bridge. Soon you're going to see, the new arena complex, and you can already see those new beautiful, parking deck and Corps of Engineers building. Right as someone from Texas may be thinking, hey, let's pull off here and see what's going on. You see all that barbed wire. And, to me, it's like, we'll just wait to Buc-ee's, we'll just keep going. If all of a sudden people are seeing mixed use development, waterfront entertainment district, Lord knows, maybe a baseball stadium or something fun, I think it changes the look and face of Mobile forever. It's something I think about often, and I'm happy to say there are some other leaders in our area that see the moving of the jail as a real necessity. So I dream about that area. I really do.
Well, I was going to save this for a little later, but since we're talking about this right now, how do you see Brookley by the Bay flowing into this? And, it's kind of, it hasn't happened yet, really. It seems like it's kind of stagnating a little bit. What kind of priority would that be for you? Or would it be a priority?
Huge. I hope, to continue the other answer too, like I hope that people remember me for the amount of public water access I help to bring. Yeah. And I don't know that there's anywhere better to do that than Brookley by the Bay. And it'll be a high priority of mine to get that open to the public as fast as I can. I think that property is so beautiful. Look, we can install a little parking and some walking and bike trails, and that alone will be amazing. I love some of the plans I've seen for it, but it costs a lot of money to buy that property. We have a lot of projects going on, so I want to be fiscally responsible and realize that we can't dump $25 million into that right now, that doesn't mean the public should be kept out of there. So I think of my trolley public transportation system as hoping to connect that both to the airport and downtown. But we got some rail infrastructure around there. Boy, wouldn't it be neat if we had some light rail connecting the airport and downtown? We're bringing back Amtrak. I think there's infrastructure in place that could make that a reality. But between our public transportation, I think we can truly connect that to our entertainment districts and make it just the crown jewel of our parks program. So, but right there, I do imagine I've heard the story a long time ago, and I've heard other people echo it. Young people who have grown up down the bay, hundreds of yards from Mobile Bay, and never saw it with their eyes until they were adults. That's crazy to me. And Mobile is a city surrounded by water, but you don't always feel it. And so I imagine a kid with a little tackle box and a cane pole getting to enjoy, some of the best parts of being a Mobilian and being surrounded by this beautiful bay, the Delta just north of us, a place where a kid can really enjoy what it means to live on the water. And I think nowhere presents a better opportunity than Brooklyn by the Bay.
Okay. How do we make our young people want to come back to Mobile? I know this is something for people like me. You've got 4 kids. I've got 2 kids who are finishing up college. My hope is one day maybe they'll come back and live near Dad. But, how do you make young people want to come back to Mobile for their careers and raise their families here? What are we lacking? What do we need?
Yeah, I don't know that we can strong arm them and force them.
Right,
but,
right.
Every time I try to make my kids do something, it gets harder. But I think we build a city that everybody wants to be a part of. People say, well, how do we stop the exodus to Baldwin County or to the county? You build a city that people want to be a part of. And I think we do that by doing a lot of little things right, cleaning up some litter, making this a more beautiful place, highlighting the beauty that already is Mobile, but more entertainment, more fun. I think the arena, I really don't know that people appreciate the impact that arena can really have on this city. We haven't had top-tier talent coming through Mobile for 40, 50 years, providing those concerts that not just people who live here want to go to, but people will be willing to fly to, drive to. That's huge. We're going to get hockey back. I talk a little bit about a potential waterfront baseball part, but it's worked in Pensacola. It's worked in Montgomery. There are a lot of places that had success with that. And when you talk about younger people, they need opportunity. So we have a lot of industrial based opportunity. I'd like to see us expand, in tech and kind of white collar opportunity. I think the airport's going to truly help out with that. And to me, it's not something that I grew up worried about, but a lot of young people care about having a walkable community, being able to park that car and not, maybe you don't get in it until you got to run to Greer's or Sam's or Costco. A real opportunity to park that car and hop on a trolley and get down to work, to walk to your favorite neighborhood restaurant and bar. And based on the age of our city, we have a city in the older parts that is very conducive to that. That's why I really am into the trolleys.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot because it all of a sudden makes most everything east of 65 a walkable community. Yeah. And that is a high priority for a lot of young people. So all those things, make it fun. I do think having a great dating scene helps. So, the more young people we get.
How are you going to do that as mayor?
I want to see more people living downtown.
The matchmaker in general? Okay, yeah.
Lucy set up quite a few people. I could put her to work on that. But, maybe we'll just have, you could start running, Mobile's most eligible bachelors and bachelorettes.
Well, we're doing what we can. We've hired one of them.
It would be a good paper for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, it would be.
See?
It would be. Kyle, I think you've got one, and I think you kind of touched on this. But.
Yes, I do. And then, we kind of talked about, seeing more opportunities for tech. We're going to kind of get into that realm here. How do you see Mobile taking advantage of AI, both from a governmental and as a community standpoint?
Yeah, AI's here. If it doesn't scare you a little bit, I don't know that you're paying enough attention. but AI has been used in a lot of cities to solve some, pretty big issues. And some of it's just getting, communication with the city, whether it's through chat bots and other things. But the way that I am excited to use it certainly is in traffic management. One of the things, moving people through your city efficiently is very important. And to me, the weight censored timed lights, we try to synchronize them. That's outdated. Let's use real time information and let's know that, hey, this light has 76 cars stopped at it.
Yeah.
There are 4 down this way that have nobody. We can go ahead and pause those, red light those, let the other traffic go, and we can fire this light for 48 seconds. I don't know a person who can sit behind a computer and make that a reality, but AI is doing it every day around the country. Yeah. And I'll always be looking. There's AI that at least proposes that it can help you time your police routes so that you can, be a deterrent to crime, and it could be a predictor of likely hotspots. I don't know. I have to look into that more before I believe it, but there are people living here. I've met people on the campaign trail who actively do this for other cities who are living right here.
Yeah.
Met one guy at the Buccaneer Yacht Club the other day who was doing that. So I want to talk to these folks. I know it can work with traffic because it's worked in so many other areas, but I think it can be employed in a lot of ways to make, hopefully, a citizen's customer service experience with the city better.
Okay.
Interesting.
What are your thoughts about the education being provided by the Mobile County public school system right now?
I think we have some incredible educators. I think we have a lot of wonderful people working in the public school system. It's big. It's big. There are a lot of kids. I want to be a partner in every way that I can to improve educational outcomes. And I'll tell you one sticking point that I keep running into is preschool. I studied science in college. If you study brain activity in children, you see consistently that from the ages of 3 to 4, that's when a kid's most apt to take in language skills. 3 to 7, that's when kids are just sponges for information. And the truth is, in Alabama, you don't even have to go to kindergarten. It's not the law that you have to go to kindergarten. So we've got kids starting for the first time any organized education at 6, 7 in first grade, and they've missed out almost entirely on that window. So there is state funding for preschool. I want to, as mayor, assist existing organizations to get up to the level where they can receive that funding. As mayor, I'll be willing to invest in those programs as well. If we can get more kids in that early education window, engaged, learning, I think we're going to have less kids that feel left behind. I think we're going to have less kids that are 2 and 3 grade levels behind in reading and math, and that will improve our educational outcomes. The truth is our magnet schools are great. They outperform a lot of our local private schools, regional school systems. I do think we need to change the narrative on our school system a little bit. We're not 10s and 20 points behind Baldwin County. We lag behind 3 or 4 points. The system is not as bad as it feels to some people. I got 4 kids in public school right now. They're getting a fantastic education. So we do need to change the narrative, but I want to change the reality of those outcomes too.
Is there any thought to a city school system?
I thought about it. I think in the end, it's huge. It affects property values. It affects people's choice whether to move here or not. It's one of the things that I looked at very hard early in this campaign. The way the state law reads, we would have to purchase all of that property from the county school system, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
There's no way to do it, in my opinion, without some serious tax hikes. And I don't know that Mobilians are, chomping at the bit for that. At least as I see it now, I think partnering with, supplementing our current school system is the best way forward. And look, we got some great people there who want to do the same thing. It's a huge system to run. I don't envy their position. I just want to help.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then you'd kind of mentioned this earlier too, the airport that is supposed to come online next year. And then what does it need to be successful when it comes online?
My hope for it is that it's going to be South Alabama's airport. We need to pull in people from Baldwin County and Washington County and Clark County, and hopefully even people from East Mississippi. And I think the only way you do that is having the flights that people want at a price they're willing to pay. So we have to keep our ticket prices low. I'm thankful that the MAA has really fought to limit the amount of debt that we're going to have on that airport. That debt has to be passed on to the customer through ticket prices. And so we got to keep those prices low and competitive. That means getting the right carriers in here with the right directs that we need, that people want to see. I'll say that I think they've got a great team out there. I know they've had some cost issues they've had to tackle, and I'm confident that they're going to get it done. And I certainly want to help them in every way I can.
How important do you think getting a low-cost carrier in here, that is, in keeping a low-cost carrier here, is to that endeavor? I mean, it seems to me is a major issue, but what's your thought on it?
I enjoyed it while we had one.
Yeah.
I rode Frontier both to Chicago and Denver. It was great. In the end, we need more people flying out of here. And so, yes, I think low-cost carriers are important. Southwest used to kind of be in that low-cost carrier conversation. I don't know that they're still qualify as that, but they are pretty reasonable. I'd love to see Southwest come in here. I'd love to see, Delta and American stay and increase their destinations. But low-cost carriers, you see a lot of airports that are successful without them. I think it would be great to have one here.
Switch back to the water a little bit. The issue of dredge spoils being dumped back into the bay after maintenance of the ship channel is a hot topic around here. Some believe it's responsible for degradation of water quality in the bay and maybe even damage to the to fish and other seafood. What's your take on the issue? What would your stance be as mayor?
I've talked to people on both sides of this issue, and many don't. I have a biology degree. That was my degree in undergrad. We work on data, but I don't think you can ignore anecdotal evidence that something's having a negative effect. Y'all ran a story about oysters. My friend's father is featured in that. You can't ignore these instances of, limited catch, dying oysters, limited crab. I won't say that we've had more jubilees this year than normal, but it feels like we have. That turbidity can cause low oxygen content. Just because it's an accepted practice in other bays doesn't mean it's right for ours. I think we need to make sure, especially for this maintenance dredging, that we're putting the dredge that is usable to work. Let's use it to create wetlands. Let's use it to reinvigorate wetlands. Let's do a study and see where we could add upper delta islands that will have a positive effect on our ecosystem. I don't think randomly spreading it through the bay long-term is a viable option. And I'm glad to hear some of our, I know Senator Katie Britt has been talking about it a great deal. I talked to Congressman Figures about it not long ago.
Yeah. They
see it as a real issue. We've got, Mobile Bay is our most precious natural resource that Mobile has. We got to protect it.
Okay. There's an ongoing dispute over the use of Big Creek Lake for recreational purposes. What's your take on that?
Man, rapid fire. I like
rapid fire. Yes, we're kind of going. We're just going through it here.
I have a lot of friends that are directly affected by that issue. Yeah. What I'd hate to see anytime that, and I know MAWS is not technically a governmental body, but it's quasi. I don't like to see those kind of decisions that are going to affect a large swath of the public made in a vacuum without taking public comment. And I think, since this decision was made, I do believe some public comment has been accepted. And I think there are a lot of other water sources around the country, in the state. You look at Lake Martin, they're afraid of the same issues with these invasive species. They found a way to coexist with recreational boaters, and just people using the waterway. I think there's a middle ground. I think there is a middle ground that, as mayor, it has to be my first priority to protect the water supply and the drinking water. But I do think there's a way that, whether it's non-motorized craft, whether it is boats that are only used within that water source, I think there's a way forward where people can both enjoy that water and we can feel safe that our drinking water is protected.
Okay.
Mhm. And then staying on the topic of drinking water, there's Mobile River is the backup source for our drinking water, and Alabama Power plans to bury 21 million tons of toxic coal ash alongside the river in a pond that has already leached toxins into the groundwater. Do you support their plan as it is now, or do you oppose it?
I don't know if you. I think it's an updated plan that I reviewed the other day, and it included pulling that pond, really closing about 40% of it, pulling it further away from the river. To my understanding, removing all of the water.
That's the standard plan. That's the cap in place plan that they've had. Yes.
What I am excited about, enthused about, encouraged by is that now it's economically feasible for them to actually recycle that material and use it in construction material.
It'll take a bit to do it, though.
It'll take some time. Well, it's. I support a plan that involves the complete removal of the coal ash, and I'm thankful that there's an economically feasible way to do that. I can't say how long that's going to take. The cap in place program that as I understand it, and this might be incorrect, but they'll still be able to pull from that and continue to recycle the material. And I think ultimate removal has to be the goal. And I don't think there's, I don't think there's a perfect plan when it comes to it. What I'm encouraged by this plan that I've seen, we got to see the actual results of it. We got to see some of this material actually leaving. But we have to protect our water source. I'm not sure that I'd be drinking out of Mobile River anytime soon. As it is, whether there's coal ash or not. But we got a lot of environmental factors. Whenever you have industry on your water, you're going to have a lot of things to be concerned about. I think that some folks have been very loud about this issue, and I think Alabama Power has taken notice. So I'll certainly be an advocate for keeping look, we got the Delta. We're talking about the Delta, which is the most biodiverse area of the entire country, more freshwater fish species, trillium. We got, it is truly an amazing place. We have to protect it. And there's no doubt that this represents a major threat. I don't want to see a major hurricane pick up a bunch of that water and put it back in our river.
Yeah.
So putting a lid on it doesn't sound like the worst idea to me. We got to make sure that's not leaking into the river through the soil.
We've been talking a lot for years now about ecotourism. I don't know that we've ever really gotten very far with it. Is that something that you think about at all, or is that sort of a
it definitely
back burner issue? Is it?
Well, I mean, God, I have one friend who he lives out in New Mexico now, but is from Alabama, and he talks often about going on like a bush knife tour of the Delta, just getting dropped off out there with a bush knife. And I don't know that I'm ready for that.
That's he might like to be. I don't know. There's too many alligators out there for that.
Sounds a lot of variables. You
could go with him, Kyle. You could chronicle it.
There's no doubt there's a huge opportunity there. One of Alabama's biggest tourism drivers is already wildlife. Deer hunting, turkey hunting. It's something that I would certainly support. I don't know. I'm open to really good ideas on how we can activate that. I really want Mobile to be a place where people can experience the water in ways that they can't everywhere else. And like the Delta's special.
Yeah.
Mobile Bay is special. And anything I can do to help highlight that, I'm in.
Well, we'll keep talking about water here, but the cruise ship terminal, where do you see that being? I mean, we've got one company coming through here, and do you foresee that being more? Do you see it becoming a bigger issue, a bigger driver of the economy down here?
I think it certainly could be. I know we have interest from another line.
Yeah,
figuring out a way to let the two coexist happily might be difficult. Parking's an issue. Public transportation excites me because it can help with that parking issue. The Amtrak train coming along excites me because that could help with that parking issue at the cruise terminal. I think we can certainly find a way to support more. I wish we could add on to our current parking deck. I do know some other alternate sites that are possible, you know, that could help us expand. But Mobile's proven itself as a port that can bring success to a cruise line, and I'm thankful we've got more people interested. And look, I want to create a downtown, a city where people want to spend a little time on the front end of their vacation or the back end. And I like the direction we're moving in.
Speaking of public transportation, you've mentioned trolleys several times, but you haven't really gone into a lot of detail about what you're envisioning here. Are we talking about trolleys on tracks, or
do you see like an actual trolley, like with the wires and everything and the rails? Or
I wish.
What do you have in mind?
You can still find that map on the city's website. You can still find the map of the old electronic trolley rails. You're talking about $1 billion in infrastructure. I don't think that we can do that.
Tearing up a lot of roads to do that.
But I do think, you know, when I say trolley, I mean a bus base, shorter wheelbase trolley that we got a couple bumping around town. I know South Alabama just bought a couple. I think they're more cost effective. They're about a quarter of the price of one of these buses.
So this is in lieu of the wave, is what you're talking about, or in addition to?
Potentially in addition to. I think the you know, we've got old roads, and I don't know if you passed a wave bus on Dolphin Street anytime recently, but they don't really fit in the lane. You kind of got to give them a wide berth. I want something that fits the character of our city, something that will be attractive for anybody to use. The only way public transportation is really successful is if it's a viable option for everybody. You know, we definitely have to serve the people who need it most, but you know, Mobile has 4 colleges. It doesn't really feel like a college town. And a big reason for that is at Spring Hill in South Alabama, I think a majority of their students don't have their own car, don't have their own vehicle. So it's hard for them to get downtown or go to different events. So I want to connect them to downtown. I want to connect Mobile citizens to Mobile jobs. And if we create a truly convenient system where instead of waiting an hour and 15 minutes in the sun for a bus to hopefully come by, you've got a trolley that's going to pass you on any major thoroughfare in Mobile every 30 minutes. You know, every 20 minutes if we can do it. Something that's reliable, convenient, and, you know, fun, hopefully. But no, trolleys, bus base, you can buy about 4 of them for the price of a bus. We'll employ more drivers. I like straight routes. I got highlighters out and drew out my routes on the city. But, you know, you got government, right? And then you got Airport and Dolphin Street and Old Shell and Spring Hill. And then you've got some kickers up to Africatown and, you know, up Stanton and kind of do a loop there. You can do a loop down Broad Street, down to the new airport and up Michigan, connecting back to that government line. And I really like up and backs. You know, I want you to be able to, I need to go downtown, so I need to catch a west running bus on University Boulevard, and I need to head east. Well, I said that wrong. North running bus on University and head east on Spring Hill or Dolphin or wherever. So it's not complicated. You don't need a codex to figure out how to get where you're going. And you know that no matter what bus stop you get off on, you're going to see a bus within the next 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
Not a bus, trolley.
Trolley. We've talked a lot about downtown stuff. Talk about the rest of the city. What's in store for West Mobile in a Cheregatis administration?
You know, it's a great place to live. I like to see more, you know, food and entertainment and places to go and spend that sales tax money. That helps our city greatly, but I also want to find ways to attract tourism there. And one thing I see for West Mobile specifically is, you know, Mobile's a baseball town. We have a ton of travel baseball teams.
Yeah.
They've got nowhere to play in our city. We put, you know, 10, 12, 20 in some cases, travel ball teams out into the Gulf Coast region and beyond. There's no top tier park to play a tournament here in Mobile. I look at West Side Park, has a lot of potential. They've got the land for it. They've got enough fields. I think we could really build a top tier baseball complex there that could attract and compete with some of our local, competitors. Nice people.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of there's good hotels out there. There are a lot of restaurants to eat at. I think that West Mobile could really benefit from that. What else? I hear a lot of people want a Trader Joe's.
Yeah,
So
people do.
I'll try to pursue that,
Heard that.
even though Lucy might get mad at me. But they've got their own parameters, and one of them is median income.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to raise the median income for our city. Right now, it's at about $34,000. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to have that creep up to $50,000 over the next 20 years, and so that's something I'll be pursuing at every turn.
I know one of the things when, speaking of income, one of the things that when Sandy Stimson first ran, he and I spoke about was his desire to see more of a black middle class in Mobile. I don't know that we've really made a lot of strides in that. Maybe we have, but I don't know that we have. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you make it happen?
To me, I'd like to see more of a middle class period.
Right.
I think our country has, it's not gone in a direction where the middle class has really benefited. I think we're fighting against that specifically here in Mobile by bringing in a lot of, high paying, blue collar, in many cases, jobs. And we've got an opportunity where, college is no longer the only path to wealth.
Right.
And I think through workforce development, we can really bring black, white, and otherwise train people to be immediately productive, immediate parts of the working class, straight out of high school, no debt. I guess I'm probably in the middle class. I still got a little college debt that I have to worry about. You can go get that certificate for electrician, plumber, welder straight out of high school, be earning real money that you can actually afford a home on. I'd like to see more people on the path to home ownership. The vast majority of Americans' wealth is tied up in their home. And so I do look at programs. We need to continue to increase our workforce housing, affordable housing, if you will. But we have programs like down payment assistance. We have programs like critical repair that'll allow people who own their home but really aren't able to afford to care for it to protect that home through that critical repair, get their roof fixed, get their house back, seaworthy, if you will. I want to see more of the middle class, period. And I want Mobile to be a place where the middle class can thrive, that their dollar goes further, that they have more opportunities for fun, to enjoy their lives. And I like the trajectory we're on.
Yeah. When you talk about West Mobile, do you think more about annexation at any point?
I do. I had some friends that lived in Houston for a little while. They've moved back here. I'm happy to have them back here. But visiting them was the first time I really spent much time in Houston. And Houston went from, I want to say, like the 35th largest city in the country to the third essentially overnight. And they didn't annex quick enough. And so you go to Houston, you might have a high rise next to a single family grandmother's home.
Yeah.
I expect Mobile to grow. I expect Mobile to blow too. But,
maybe that's the guys out, the leaf blowers out front. Yeah. Guy's making his living out there. He's got to do his job. So
keeping it pretty, keeping downtown classy.
Yeah.
We got to protect the character of our city. And so I do think continued annexation might be a part of that.
Yeah.
If we're going to grow, we can't be cut off by other smaller municipalities cutting us off from pathways to growth. But I will say I'm happy about the annexation we just did. We need to revitalize our city from within. Stretching those city services further makes it harder to do the good job that we need to do. I want to get back to doing the little things right. I want hand crews cleaning the litter out of our gutters. I want to be scraping our ditches to make sure that our stormwater infrastructure is actually working at capacity. It rains a lot here.
Yeah.
We got to make sure that we're doing those things right before we start pulling other areas into our city. I want to see some neighborhoods revitalized. We've got a lot. I keep a map on my wall with all the vacant and blighted property east of I-65. And most of these are historic neighborhoods with historic houses. So
well, you're leading right in my next question.
Okay,
talk about blight and litter, and how do we stop that? I mean, we've been talking about it since I came here. It's been forever.
It's
well,
look, I want to be a mayor who solves problems nobody else has. I want to find real solutions. Litter is a big one to me. But to me, litter is like, how do you return pride in your city, pride of your citizens in your city to a level that they wouldn't even think about littering? That's the goal. You can do that through education. I want to do that through, I really like community service, the old judge in me. We used to have large litter cleanup crews, and I think it makes people think twice before they toss that bag out of the car window. We need our litter crews. I'm happy that we've brought back hand crews to actually do some of that litter cleanup, especially
Can they
around
wear
our
a sign that
drains.
says "I litter" on it?
Yeah. I have thought about creating they're like bad drivers of Mobile on Facebook. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Litterers of Mobile. Look, let's send in your picture, right? It's hard to prove littering cases, but not if you got 5 pictures of it. And a picture of the driver and a picture of the tag, and let's hold people accountable. But litter is often that first impression that people get of your city. We've got to clean it up. Blight.
I was going to say blight is something really even maybe more intractable in a way.
It can be, but I look at, we've got the housing improvement program that's starting to bring in more money specifically for revitalization and affordable housing. I know Candace gets mad at me for talking about TIFs too much, but a tax incremental finance district that allows, as an area grows and property values improve, it creates a separate bucket of money that goes right back into that neighborhood. So it really feeds itself, and it can make saving a historic home, a blighted home that is not economically feasible. You can provide the grants and resources that make it economically feasible for a developer or an owner. I think it's a big deal. I think it does take increased revenue sources, and that's one that really doesn't take tax dollars out of the pocket of individuals. We just got to make sure that we're doing it in a way that we're not displacing people. I want people living in their neighborhood. I want them to have pride in their neighborhood. One other issue, you always want the private market to take over, and actually drive that revitalization. But I've talked to some of our people in town, a gentleman that works for the Navy, and he's like, how are we going to get these people to want to build submarines? How are we going to get people to want to build ships and airplanes? And I said, well, how about you give me $500,000 and let's build the finest park you've ever seen in the most difficult neighborhood in our city, and let's put a big submarine in it that kids can play in. Let's brand it with Austal or whoever, U.S. Navy. Let's show the community that we care about them and that you want them. You want them to be a participant in your industry. And, I think that could raise property values a little bit. I think that could create a market. So finding those community projects that a neighborhood can really rally around, I think that can help.
Talk a little bit about transparency in your administration, what you think about that, what it means to you.
I tell people I'm a man of faith, and that means that I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to do the right thing no matter what the political consequences are, and I'm going to love my neighbor no matter who they are. And I think part of that telling the truth is being an open book to some degree. I am committed to regular audits. We generally do that. How do you get that information to people? You might sit down and read through an audit. Not many people will.
I'll make Kyle do it.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
That's his job.
That's just part of it.
I want to be somebody that has an open door that you can call And even if I don't have the answer right away, I'll find it. Anytime you're dealing with, look, it's not my money. It's not even the city council's money. It's the people's money that we are spending. And I want them to have a high level of trust in how we're utilizing their money to make their lives better, whether that's fixing their potholes, fixing their roads, fixing the drainage system, investing in a new arena, a new theater. People need to feel like they can trust you. And I certainly want to be an open book when it comes to those issues.
Tell me something that you've done in your career that you would do differently. Maybe, I know people don't like to talk about failures, but something that you'd maybe look back and say, I wish I'd done things a little bit differently that way.
Man, that's a
tough one, I know.
Yeah.
I will say, I pursued a career path early on, especially through college, that I was going to go be a doctor. And I did that because I wanted to be financially secure. I grew up in a family that we weren't very financially secure. And so that was my main driver. And I in ways, I wish I would have realized that earlier. I wish I would have listened to the calling of the good Lord a little earlier, but thankfully he got through to me. I don't know. I don't regret too many of the mistakes I've made because I've learned so much from them. I probably would have started advertising at the barbecue restaurant a little earlier because that worked. That billboard, boy, I wish I'd have gotten that 6 years before I did. But what else?
As a judge, was there anything that
there was one time where I had a small claims court.
Yeah.
It was early on in my career, and I had this one gentleman who would not quit quoting his HOA bylaws, which have really no effect whatsoever in court.
Right.
And he was very upset with his neighbor because they had, I think there were lights that were the wrong color under the HOA, and he was suing them. And I was trying to get him to narrow the issue to something I could actually address. He really wouldn't. He was very rude, and I got a little upset, and instead of using my gavel, I used my hand, and I hit the bench to quiet him. Well, I hit it kind of hard, and there happened to be a piece of glass there, and all I saw was the glass kind of raise to eye level and fall, and I broke it, and I was fine. Everybody was fine, but I felt like I had lost my temper for a hair. I calmed down very quickly. Dismissed his case because he had no actual case to be pursuing. But then Bob Sherling, the judge who I replaced, told me the story behind the piece of glass which I had broke. And it had been on the desk, I believe, of Bubba Marsall, and how it had broken accidentally. And he had shaved it down and fixed it and then used it for his bench. And I felt, about as tall as an ant when he told me that story. So I would have used the gavel instead.
Yeah. Well, that segues into my next question. There's a lot of criticism that comes with being mayor. How do you handle criticism?
I don't think you can totally ignore it. There's truth in a lot of criticism. So, I want to make sure that I'm serving the people in the best way that I possibly can. So I think you got to take it in. You can't let it beat you down. It's like I talk about the city. Mobile has issues. We have issues to fix, but we have so many things to be excited about. We have a lot to be optimistic about in our city. So you can't let it drag you down. You can't let it stop you from moving forward and finding solutions, but you do have to listen to it. And, I was raised by a Greek father, and he raised me to have very tough, thick skin. So I think I'm ready for it.
Okay. And I guess we're getting close to an hour. We said we'd keep you about an hour. So, I got one last question, and it's maybe just an easy one, but is there something about you that you'd like to tell the listeners, the voters, that maybe they don't know about you?
I like to fish if you have an extra spot on your boat one day, but, what I want people to know is that what brings me joy in this life is helping others. It took me too long to realize that, but I've learned it. And my true goal as mayor is to make the lives of everyone who calls Mobile home better. I want to improve lives in every way that I can. and it's not for some self-serving purpose other than it does make me happy to see other people smile, to see other people, something good happen to them. So if you want to know what drives me, that truly is what drives me. And I want my grandkids to grow up around the corner. So I want to make sure Mobile's full of opportunity for my kids. I don't want to have to take a flight to go see my family. I want them right around the corner. So that's why I'm here.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope everybody who listens to this gets a little more clear picture of you as a candidate as well. So, all right, folks. Well, we're going to call it quits, and we'll see you next time.
Thank y'all.
The Lagnia-Pod is a Something Extra publishing production. Executive producers are Rob Holbert and Ashley Trice. Music is by Some Pulse Sounds and Electro Animals. Only subscribers like you have access to this podcast. Tell your friends they can sign up at my.lagniamobile.com. For advertising opportunities, please call 251-450-4466.